Welcome to Test Crackers. We're on a mission to make studying for the GMAT and GRE not only not suck, but actually be awesome. We put tons of care and attention to detail into giving our students the best possible experience that they can have in our live, online, and in-person classes, as well as in our one-on-one private tutoring sessions. And now we're excited to bring some of that care and attention to detail to a more public format via YouTube videos. And today, I want to talk to you about whether you should be retaking the GMAT or GRE, and if you plan to do that, how you can do it best. So let's get right into it. Should you retake your GMAT or GRE? I think the main thing that you want to ask here is, are you way off from your target program's averages? I think more than 50 points off from your GMAT average or more than 5 points off from either section GRE average is maybe not way off, but it's risky. You're probably barely at the bottom of what they'll accept at that point. So it's certainly in some situations worth just trying and applying. But if you have the willpower and the time to study and retake, it's probably a good idea in those situations. And of course, if you're more off than that, then it's almost certainly a good idea because that time is likely well spent because it'll help you get in. Now, there are certain situations in which retaking is not a good option. For example, if other parts of your application are much, much weaker, it could make a lot more sense to invest in those. And that's when I would recommend just researching some admissions consultants. And if you're not sure who you should be working with, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find me in any of the socials in the description of this video, or you can just reach out to me at the GMAT strategy, basically on any social network. Most people are probably going to need to take these exams 2 or 3 times, and I think it's very worth mentioning that at the beginning of talking about retaking, because I think some people have some self-judgment and some stigma around it, like, oh, I should be able to knock this out just once. But it's really, really difficult to get a peak performance out of yourself in any day of life. Even if you sleep well, you eat all the right things, you exercise, you're prepared. I mean, sometimes you still get to a meeting and it's just an off day. There's something about the vibe in the room or the people or you. And I don't think that we've truly solved those mysteries of human performance as a species yet. And hopefully we'll get closer over time. But for now, one of the reasons to plan to take 2 or 3 times is just luck of the draw. Some of that is the test itself. For example, the test is randomized and you will take both on a computer. So you may have just sat for a session where you got served up questions that kind of catered to your weaknesses and not as much to your strengths. Whereas on a different day, you might get a different order of questions or order of sections that might cater to your strengths a little bit more. And you can control that element of luck by planning to take the test 2 or 3 times. You don't always have to sign up for 2 or 3 sessions in advance. If you want to just commit to one and make that your stake in the sand and then just reevaluate at that point once you get that first one under your belt, I think that's a great strategy. However, if you're concerned about getting enough test dates in before your application deadlines, you may want to just sign up for 2 or 3 dates, and then you can always cancel the other dates later for a small fee. And I think it's worth it to have that peace of mind if that's important to you. Of course, the other thing is just human performance variables like sleep, like what you ate that week, relationship stress, work stress, all kinds of stress that we deal with that can affect our performance, sometimes without us really knowing. So let's say you do plan to retake after all this. You've discussed this with some admissions consultants, or you're just looking at your scores and you're just honest with yourself. You're thinking, yeah, that's really not high enough to give me the chance that I want. And I'm motivated to continue. I'm just not sure what to do. So the first thing you want to do is assess your progress. And you do want to write all of this down in a place that you can see it regularly and consult every single time you study would be my advice. So you do want to note what worked, because clearly, well, maybe not clearly, and hence the purpose of this video, I don't actually think a lot of this stuff is clear. But you do want to continue to focus on the things that you did do well in your study plan, or the things that you did in your study plan that you felt gave you a lot of return on investment. So you don't want to stop doing any of that stuff just because you didn't get the result that you wanted. Try to be honest with yourself as well if you're self-assessing, or book a session, 30-minute or hour-long session with a private tutor. Or if you took a class, see if your instructor will talk to you for 15 minutes on the phone or share some emails, and just see if you can get some outside perspective as well about what you may have done well and what maybe you didn't do so well. And that brings me to an important question, which did you actually execute on your plan, or did you cut corners with the plan that you were given? So if you took a class or you followed an online plan, did you just do part of it and then ignore the difficult stuff? Well, that might have compromised your results. And that's something that I see a lot of people doing, and that's totally fair. You know, it's really difficult for a lot of us to study for these exams emotionally in terms of making time physically, it can be very, very difficult. And so there is a temptation to cut corners. If you did that, then almost certainly that's the place to double down on your retake, is just do the painful things that you avoided the first time around. There's no shame in avoiding it the first time around. Maybe you can get away without it. If you're watching this video before you even start studying for some reason, you can totally try to cut some corners and see if you get a great result. I don't personally recommend that. I'm just saying you can do it. But if you are planning to retake, you cannot really afford to cut corners with your plan anymore, because the truth is most plans out there work. It just doesn't work when you don't execute the plan. And you may have heard me say that before. It's like a diet to lose weight. Pretty much any diet works to lose weight if you follow certain fundamentals, but it just doesn't work when you don't stick to the diet. You know, it's just something we all need to be reminded of from time to time. So one place that I see people really going off track here, and this is something I discuss a lot in my classes, is reviewing questions properly. Because I think a big pitfall that many people fall into is they think that just doing a bunch of questions is going to move their score. And in certain areas of life, that can work. Like just tying my shoes a bunch of times will definitely make me better at tying my shoes faster. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. Same thing a lot of times with operating a motor vehicle. It just gets relegated to this sort of subconscious area where I don't really have to focus on the task very much anymore. Unfortunately, GMAT and GRE studying is not that way. I think the best analogy is you could read 20 books in a week, but you're not necessarily going to get a return on that time unless you actually learn and retain things from those books. So rather than just reading and exposing yourself to a bunch of ideas, but not integrating any of them, which is often the case with people who read a ton, it might be better to just read one book or one chapter of one book and maybe write down 1 to 3 key takeaways that you see on a regular basis that actually become a part of the way you live your day-to-day life, or the way you perform any skill, or whatever that is, whatever you're reading to do. So that's how I like to think about practice problems. And in general, you're looking for quality over quantity. Now, of course, there is a limit to that. You know, if you're just doing one practice problem a week, I don't know, if you're getting really meaningful takeaways from that, that actually could really help. It's certainly better than doing 100 problems a week and learning nothing, which unfortunately is extremely common. I think many people have this false metric in their minds that if I just do a bunch of questions today, like 30 questions, now I'm 30 units better at the GRE. And unfortunately, it just does not work that way. So if you're not sure how to review questions and you're committed to only using free resources, then a little bit of web searching should help you out tremendously. Otherwise, if you're looking for some paid resources that can help, I'll make some recommendations at the end of this video. So first is assessing your plan. Second is assessing your knowledge. And this might be kind of obvious, but you do want to think about how many questions am I missing based on just not knowing the material. Like I didn't know the strategy, I didn't know the approach, I didn't know the core content. And you want to make a list and categorize that. Look at your past practice exams. If you didn't take that many practice exams, it's time to get at least 2 or 3 under your belt so you have a reasonably sized data set that you can make inferences upon. And you just want to write down on average per exam, how many questions am I missing purely because of knowledge. If you're looking to remedy that, I'll talk about that in a second, but like I have written on the screen, it usually just comes down to memorization and practice problems, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. The other thing that often goes overlooked is assessing your performance habits. And I think a lot of people also make the erroneous assumption that just knowing the material is going to be enough to do well on a GMAT or GRE. And you know, knowing the material is often enough for regular school tests, but the GMAT and GRE, they're not only testing your knowledge of the material. They're both designed to be reasoning tests, which means they're testing your capacity, first of all, to understand the material, but also to manipulate it, rearrange it, understand how it can be manipulated. And there's this whole other level that's very difficult to arrive at if you don't have the core foundation built. So it's similar to, like, I could build a beautiful roof on a house with a crappy foundation, but that work is probably going to go to waste because the house is going to fall down, the roof is going to get damaged. And I kind of wasted time on that. So it's really difficult to get around that, that idea of it's not just what I know, it's what I get credit for on the test. That's what moves your score, not just what you know, but what you actually get credit for. So when we talk about performance habits, the sort of the simplest way to think about this is how many questions are you missing that you actually knew how to do? How many times per practice test, because you're probably not going to be able to see super granular results on your official exam. But you can look back at your practice tests and assess and just, again, put it in a spreadsheet or write down the number of questions that you missed or the types of questions you're missing that you know how to do but getting wrong anyway. So things like misreading the question, misbubbling an answer, maybe having a calculation error like 2 + 2 = 5. That kind of stuff happens all the time under time pressure. And you just need to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself about which of these areas is holding you back, or what mix of these areas is likely holding you back. And keep in mind that if you don't change these performance habits, then knowing more material might not actually help your score, because if you're not getting credit for what you know, knowing more is not a solution to that problem, okay? And just keep in mind that repeating the same inputs over and over and expecting different results is literally the definition of insanity. So don't do that to yourself. Now, the last key area that you do want to assess before moving forward is your timing. And if you're having significant timing issues, you want to address that. If you're not managing your time well, you want to address that. And another thing that I like to add in there is just managing the stress of the exam, because I think there is at least a little, if not a lot, of stress inherent in these exams. And while you probably won't be able to do much to diminish the amount of stress that is inherent in the test, there's a lot you can do to get better at managing that stress. And we'll talk about that right now. So what you want to do is you want to use the percentage of each of these three areas up here. How many questions you're missing because of your knowledge, how many questions you're missing because of your performance habits, and how many questions you're missing due to timing. And you want to calculate the percentage of misses from each area, and you want to devise a study plan where the number of hours you're putting in on a daily or weekly basis matches the percentage of what's hurting you most. So let's say half your misses are knowledge, 25% of your misses are poor habits, and 25% of your misses are timing. Well, then 50% of your study hours should go to learning more. 25% of your study hours should go to developing better habits, and 25% of your study hours should go to timing. So let's talk about how to address all of those. So for knowledge, like I said, a lot of it is memorization. So things like flashcards, study sheets. If you don't have a reliable source of core material and you're not sure if you actually know the material, then that's definitely time to look into a class, hire a tutor, or see if you can just get some free resources. If you're super budget constrained, free resources are a little hit or miss, but if you have a budget of $0, you really don't have much of a choice. So you just do the best that you can with what you have. But if you have a larger budget, that's definitely the time to consider a digital class or an in-person class or a live class. More on that in a moment. The other thing with knowledge is applying it. And so that's doing practice problems from a reputable source. Ideally, official sources are the best, but there aren't a ton of official problems for the GRE. A quick tip for anyone who's studying for the GRE and you're not finding a ton of official source questions, because they don't publish that many, frankly, is you can use GMAT official source materials. If you're studying for the GMAT, you're probably already familiar with the official guide for GMAT review. A new version is published every year. And if you're studying for GRE and you're lacking on practice problems, then the official guide for GMAT review can be a good help. Data sufficiency questions do not appear on the GRE, so perhaps obviously you can ignore those, but everything else applies. The only thing you won't be able to practice is vocab questions and quantitative comparisons, but there's a reasonably good number of those in practice tests that you can get pretty much anywhere, and also the official guide for GRE review. With habits, what you want to do is you want to start a spreadsheet or some type of paper and pencil note where you are identifying what the errors are that you're making and speculating on new habits you can implement that will keep you from making those mistakes. And it's a good idea to just pick one of those new habits every single time you sit down to study and make that the background focus of your entire study session, because just writing down that you should do something different is probably not going to help. You want to put some intentional energy behind that and say, okay, in this study session, I want to, by the end, have it be totally natural to always be writing down what the question's asking me at the very beginning of the question, whatever habit you think is going to help you. With timing, it's a good idea to do sets. I think this is pretty intuitive, but you just take the number of the time per question in each section. For the GMAT, that's basically going to be 2 minutes per question across the board. And for the GRE, it's about 1.5 in the verbal and 1.75 in the math time per question. And you just make a set. So like, for example, a good quant set for the GRE would be 5 questions in 9 minutes. It's not perfect, but it's like rough enough estimate of approximately the time you'll have. For GRE verbal, I like to do 10 questions in 15 minutes. For GMAT questions, I'll usually do 10 questions in 20 minutes unless you're using an alternative timing strategy. But doing those sequential questions is a nice way to practice all the skills that you need while you're taking the exam without burning a full practice test or without burning, half a day of a 4-hour practice exam. In 10 or 20 minutes, you can practice all the skills that you need: stress management, switching between question types, scratch work, other habits that you might be working on, content knowledge, assessing your strengths and weaknesses. It's basically like a little mini practice test that you do. And then you'll probably want to plan for about double the time it took you to complete the set to complete the requisite amount of review. So feel free to reach out if you have questions on that stuff. Those are probably the best pieces of general advice I can give that apply in almost all situations. If you're looking for more specific advice, feel free to reach out to us at testcrackers.org or the gmatstrategy.com. You can reach out to me, Yuri, or Seth at any of these channels, really. If you're looking to accelerate your progress, if you're very financially constrained and you just really don't have the money to spend on a class, then it's going to take a little bit longer, but I want you to know you can still achieve your goal. Okay, it's not like you need someone to help you in order to make this happen. But if you have the money to spend, I would strongly recommend spending it because you're going to get to your goal faster. You'll probably be able to get a higher score. And if you think about the return on investment over time with that, if you can get into a better program, you're probably getting a better job. You're probably making more money if we're just talking pure dollars, or you're getting a better network or something like that. So it's not like you're just burning this money. You know, this is something that you're going to make back eventually. My class, the GMAT strategy, is a study accelerator. So there's no actual like core material taught in that, but I refer you to the best sources that I think you can use to learn GMAT material. And that's at a very, very low price point as a result, because I'm not teaching the classes live. I do go live once a week for that class, just to give everyone who's in the class support. But the idea is to bring high quality education, bring the overall price of that down. If you have a slightly larger budget and you can afford to take a class at Test Crackers, I would definitely recommend that, because you'll learn all the stuff that's in the GMAT strategy class, but you'll also have a live instructor to walk you through every single detail of the exam. So you don't have to be worrying about whether you're studying the right stuff, whether you have enough strategy, and you also have someone who you can bounce questions off of in real time, more than just once a week. So let me know if you have any questions on any of that stuff. I really hope this video serves you well. And I am just always constantly wishing you well with your studies at large. And the main thing I always tell people is just stay positive and stay consistent with your studies. And when you need to, re-strategize. And it's only a matter of time before you reach your goal. Talk to you all soon.